Hi everybody, hope you're all doing well. It's Monday, that means it's time for a monologue. Today we're going to be looking at Henry V. As always, the monologue is in the description below, so take a moment to pause me, read it, and then come on back. So, first things first, as I mentioned on Friday, the end of our school year is this Thursday, which means this is going to be the last monologue video for the time being. Today we are going to be looking at Henry V, which is one of Shakespeare's histories. We looked at Henry V a long time ago with the St. Crispin's Day speech. And very quickly, as a reminder, history is neither tragedy nor comedy, and it may have elements of both. In fact, if you look at Henry V, at the end of it, Henry is at the very least engaged, if not outright married, to the Princess of France. Marriages at the end of plays technically belong in comedies. That is a fairly common thing at the end of them. And yet it's also about a war and people dying and things like that, which is very firmly tragic. So kind of a bit of both. And that's because histories are pretty much just a fictionalized version of reality. And in this case, the event that we are fictionalizing is the actual invasion of France by the King Henry V, where basically, plot summary of the play, Henry realizes or decides that France owes him some stuff, and France won't give it to him, so Henry goes to war with France, and through a series of improbable and frankly very lucky victories, Henry actually wins the day, becomes victorious, and gets most of what he wants. With all that said, we talked about one of the more improbable of his victories in the St. Crispin's Day speech, because he was severely outnumbered, and he was giving the kind of we are going to fight, and whatever happens today happens, but you are all awesome people because you're here with me speech. In a similar vein, the speech we're looking at today from Act 3, which comes before the second attempt at the French port of Harfleur. And I say the second because Henry tried, and he got beat back. So this is attempt number 2. And unlike the St. Crispin's Day speech, where he was basically saying, look, this is our one chance, we gotta do this. This one is more of Henry's, look, we failed, but we have to get back up on our feet and do this. Once more unto the breach, dear friends. Note first in that verse, that's from the very first line, he calls his military, his army, his soldiers, his friends. He is a king. The majority of his troops are the lowest social status. They are peasants. They are people who work the fields, bake bread. They're not an army. They are people that were pulled away from their homes to come fight a war that frankly won't do them much good. But Henry calls them his friends. He says, that, when we're at peace, men need to be stillness and have humility. But now, we're not at peace, we're at war, and so you must imitate the action of the tiger. He's calling on them to steel themselves, to drop away fear and regret and say, no, we are warriors, we are fighters, we will win. He calls them the noblest English. Again, rallying them not just as a group of men, but as a group of Englishmen, like calling back to their homeland, because they are across the sea, they've left their homes far behind, calling them noble, which he does later on in this speech too, by comparing them and saying, look, there is none among you, to quote from the thing, there is none of you so mean and base, meaning there are none of you who are so low in social stature. Again, remember, these are peasants, these are farmers, bakers, leather workers, people who are not fighters, people who are not nobles. And he calls them and says, no matter how or where you came from, what level of the social ladder you are on, you have nobleness in your eyes. Because you are here, because you are fighting for your people, your country, your king. And that is what he's doing. He is rallying them up by putting them all in the same boat together. And in this case, it succeeds. I mean, they capture Harfleur. They lose a lot of people doing it, which is what leads to the battle that he says the St. Crispin's Day speech at. But they win here. And I think a big part of that is how Henry motivates his troops by bringing them all together. He doesn't just, go, Peasants, fight for me. He says, no, my friends, the noblest English, all of you have nobility in you, just like me. So he basically is taking them and rallying them up to the point of, like, we're all here, we're all English, we're all noble, let's go. So that's kind of the thing here with the character, is as you're looking at this, you want to emphasize these points of sameness that Henry is using, and that's how Henry really gets his people going. You see it completely in the St. Crispin's Day speech, where he talks about these we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. And again, it's that same exact language, only further on. So, let's take a look at Henry rallying his troops. Once more, unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood. Disguise fair nature with hard-favour'd rage. Hold hard the breath and bend up every spirit to his full height. On, you noblest English, whose blood is fet from fathers of war-proof. Dishonour not your mothers, now attest that those whom you called fathers did beget you. Be copy now to men of grosser blood, and teach them how to war. And you, good yeomen, whose limbs were made in England, show us here the mettle of your pasture. Let us swear that you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not, for there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble lustre in your eyes. I see you stands like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow this spirit, and upon this charge cry God for Harry, England, and St. George. That is Henry V, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back tomorrow with Tech Tuesday. I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye!